And very kind of closed-minded to anything that wasn't just mainstream science. But I hit a point where I started to have an existential crisis, just sort of like, oh God, is this what we do forever? We just wake up and go to work. Like, what is the meaning of all of this? And I had one of those years in 2016 where a lot of things started to fall apart, or like a lot of things happened at once. And my mom, as you mentioned, we're Persian, and in our culture, we have a tradition of divination. In our family, my grandmother used to use coffee grinds, but they're not American coffee. It's not American coffee. It's like a thicker coffee where you leave the grinds in the cup, and then the grinds make pictures, and the reader intuits things about you. So my grandma used to do that. My mom was taught, and she knows how to do it. And my mom would do it for me when I was in grad school. And of course, as a scientist, I didn't really believe it. But then I would go home every weekend and she would do it for me. And my friends would fight over who could come over for the readings. And I took notes and noticed that over time, she would say things months in advance of things happening. And she would get the smallest like details right about situations that weirdly were the most meaningful to me. So, of course, people who are skeptics would listen to this and not believe it. And believe me, I didn't believe it for a lot. I just took notes and kind of lived in cognitive dissonance because I couldn't explain it with science. But all I knew was that she was more right than she was wrong. She wasn't always right, but she was, but mostly right. And it blew my mind enough that I paid attention to it. And so around that time when there were in the book I say there were two events, but really there were a lot more than that. But two events that she, saw or told in the coffee or told me details about ahead of time that came true. And, I was starting to break, kind of like losing my understanding of reality and existence. And then those two events were, I think, the final cracks. So one was the death of one of the professors at USC, University of Southern California, which is where I got my PhD and where I was working at the time. Oh, actually, no, I wasn't working there at the time, but I would go back to work there. But yeah, so she had foreseen like something, me getting really bad news, and she actually foreseen a death, but she didn't tell me that ahead of time. And that happened. It was a professor who I had worked with on my dissertation, who killed by one of the students in our graduate program. It was just really upsetting. But the fact that she had foreseen it, granted, she didn't say who it was, but she had like the closeness of the person to me downright. Like she was like, it's not someone in your life that you see every day or who's in your home or family, but it's someone you like have a connection with. Maybe from the past, like kind of things like that. And that scared me because I didn't understand how the information of someone's death could be available ahead of time. And so I started to wonder about fate and destiny, which I'd never thought about before. I didn't believe in. And my mom didn't have any answers. She's like, I don't know how this works. Like, I have no idea. So I wondered, but at the time I was still like busy and ignoring it. And then 2 years later, a relationship ended. And then that was, again, similar story with the coffee, but it was like the final leg of the stool was knocked out. And then I just kind of, felt a lot of despair and lost hope for the first time and went into like a depression. And also like I was spinning because I was like, I feel like I don't understand. And a lot of people go into science to understand life. Like we're very controlling type A type people. So that started to come up. I started to come up against that, and it was very uncomfortable. And then after a while just being in that state, then I live in LA, and so my girlfriends were like, let's go see a psychic that we know. And I was like, oh no, you guys, I can't do that. Those aren't real. But I did end up going because they said they knew someone who would turn you away if she couldn't read you, and she had done that to one of my friends twice. So I thought, okay, fine, let's go. So we went, and it blew my mind. And then I got intrigued, you know, because, and I know all the things about, you know, psychic intuitive readers, like they do cold or hot readings or whatever, but I was tracking how many variables she was getting right on the things that she was saying about certain events in my life and kind of doing not actual statistics, but, you know, kind of running through the odds in my head. And I was like, okay, the odds are pretty low.
Trying to do science on the reading, sort of. I mean, at least
Yeah,
bring
a
a
little,
scientific bent to it. Yeah.
yeah. And even, and doing that, I mean, you know, I thought, all right, I mean, the odds are not high that she would get this. Went back. So my friends and I went back a few times over the course of a year, and we like swapped readings because we're like, if they're generic, like everyone says, then we should be able to swap the readings. But it didn't work like that. Like they were specific to each of us. So I was intrigued, but I didn't do anything about it at that point. And then I heard a podcast episode. It was Chelsea Handler, who's an American comedian, in case anyone doesn't know, and she had Laura Lynn Jackson, who's a psychic medium, on her show. And Laura Lynn Jackson started talking about reincarnation and soul lessons and this whole spiritual framework that I had never ever heard of before, except that the intuitives I had gone to see, and they had mentioned that, but I had ignored that because I didn't know what it meant. So she said it, and so then that piqued my interest. But what really got my interest was she also said she like that her brain has been measured by a neuroscientist while she does readings. And I thought, oh my God, where's that study? I need to see that. And they mentioned the book Many Lives, Many Masters. So I got the book, and it's about past life regression, but I didn't know that at the time. And then that was the book that kind of was the final, like, I'm interested in this and I'm going to start reading about, because it was so mind-blowing and fascinating. And I think it just, you know, must have just resonated on some level where I was like, yeah, this psychiatrist is like Yale and Columbia educated, an atheist, he doesn't believe, and yet here he is writing this book about, I don't know what this past life regression thing is, but it seems to be healing my patient that I can't heal with any other modality. So that was so then I decided to just drop my, I mean, I tried to drop my disbelief. It's really hard to do that, but I thought at least I can do is be curious and just keep asking myself, what if I'm wrong? And so I started a personal project to interview some of the intuitives I had gone to see, some of my scientist colleagues, to kind of pick their brains on anomalous phenomena. And then eventually I started reaching out to looking into the actual scientific research that had been done on psychic phenomena, reaching out to those researchers. And that, of course, led me down the rabbit hole that many people go down at looking at the reincarnation research from University of Virginia, the NDE research, and all that. So, and then, yeah, my mind was just blown constantly. And this started, I started the project in February 2020, so right before COVID, and I had like one in-person interview, and then the rest were on Zoom or online. So it was just a personal project. Like I just wanted to explore it for myself to get answers, but I just kept having more and more questions. Like I was not getting answers. I was just getting more and more questions, and then I started to flip. And then my identity and my ego started to fight back.
Yeah. It's interesting, you know, I mean, having these discussions with folks and amassing this information, did it ever have an inkling that you were going to come out with a book about it? And did you ever even think that was possible at the time? And I'm kind of interested at what made you decide to sort of take that huge step forward, because developing your own belief system is something that you can all do, but going public with it and being sort of an advocate for that exploration is a step beyond. So what led you into that frame of mission?
Yeah, no, I did not want to write a book. I had a mentor who was on the journey with me, kind of. He was actually the one who was like, let's meet in a month and see what you've done. And I was like, I don't want this to be work. I'm like, I'm doing this for fun. But, and I mean, he made it fun. But he wanted me to do a podcast, and I was like, I don't think people will be honest with me if it's recorded and public, and I want them to be honest. So I did record a lot of the conversations and stuff, but I knew in my heart, I was like, if they know, it's gonna go be online. They're not going to tell me what they really think. So I didn't end up doing that. But at the end of the year in 2020, he told me, he's like, you have all these notes. He's like, I want to see a book draft in 2 weeks because I had winter break. And I was like, okay. I was like, first of all, I don't want to write a book. I was like, I would never go public with this. And I was like, I don't even know what I would write. And he's like, I think you should do it. Don't think of it as you're writing a book. Think of it as you're putting your notes together because you have all this, information, all these interviews. Like, you might as well organize it for yourself. He's like, in the least, it'll be, a useful exercise for you to look back on this journey and summarize everything. And I thought, okay, well, that could be useful because I was kind of confused by the end of 2020. And so I thought, okay, I'll do it. I'll do that. I was like, I had no intention of publishing it though. And so I started doing it and then realized that I did have a lot of notes and that I basically wrote half the book in that 2 weeks. Obviously I did write the whole book in 2 weeks, but I did write about half of it and realized that it wouldn't be that hard to finish it. And as I was writing it, I was getting, at the time I was getting angry at the fact that, that like there's all this evidence, but we just ignore it. And really that in private, if you speak to a lot of scientists, they'll admit it, but in public they won't. And I was like, well, that's disingenuous. Like, we can't be like that. Like, this is stupid. So I kind of got angry about that, and it became kind of like a social justice thing in my head of like, because the more I read, and the more I spoke to people, actually. I remember, Julia Mossbridge, I spoke to her. She's a neuroscientist who's written about these topics and done research on these topics, and we talked about how, of course, intuition and like tapping into that is seen as a feminine trait, so of course it's not valued. And then a lot of indigenous or other cultures have these as part of their just the way that they operate. And of course, Western culture is like, oh no, these are primitive, or these are primal, or these people are, it's not as good as Western culture and science. So then I started to get angry about that, and it became kind of a that kind of drove me to finish it, because I thought this is kind of a social justice issue. Like, this is just another way that modern society in the West has come to be like, whatever we have decided is the mainstream narrative, is the narrative, and everything else is stupid.
Yeah, and you can't question it. And that's not even considering the experiencers who've been ridiculed and made fun of, regardless of what their that's not a word, regardless of what their experience actually is, or what realm of the paranormal sort of it comes from. It's like, you can expect that a lot of people are going to be really dismissive of your experience if you do go public. So it requires a level of courage, and I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. Can I ask what the repercussions have been for you professionally? Are you still a neuroscientist practicing, I guess you'd say? And have you gotten any negative feedback from people who you work with, or positive feedback?
Well, I left USC once so for the book, I did finish writing it, and I had a friend who had written a book, and I gave it to him, and he sent it to his publisher, and they just accepted it. So it was one of those.
Kind of meant to be, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was. I feel guilty about it. I was like, I put zero effort into trying to publish this book, no effort whatsoever.
But it's really good though. So I mean, whatever you did put in was well honed, or whatever.
I mean, it was a lot of work to write it, for sure. But yeah, it just kind of. So once that I didn't like my job. I guess I wasn't resonating with my job anyway at that point at all. Like, I used to love it, and then I think even before the flip, I was sort of like, I'm not sure that this is important. And I felt dissatisfied with it. And then after the flip, I really felt that way. So once I finished writing it, I quit basically, and then I took a few months off to just like try psychedelics and do breath work and just fix my nervous system, because also in reading all this material, you well, I mean, one of my doorways was past life regression. So in reading that and all the other literature, you learn about all these, these traumas and emotions you carry around and how you lose touch with yourself. And it really felt that way. Like I felt like I was very out of touch with myself and what I wanted and who I used to be.
I would comment on that in your book. It's a very powerful passage about how you were suddenly like hit with emotions that you kind of couldn't explain, but that were like root level, visceral, like powerful emotions that kind of convinced you that there was really something going on that you were dealing with, but it had been a previous incarnation, which is
Yes, because I did a past life. Yeah, I was one of those people who had masterful defenses and like did not. I suppressed all my emotions. And you kind of end up that way, definitely through science. Science. You're supposed to be objective and serious, and so you start suppressing all these parts of yourself to fit that mold. And people actually, I remember somebody at work told me that so my astrological sign is Pisces, and one of the people who worked for us was into astrology, and she was like, you really don't seem like a Pisces, because Pisces are supposed to be really emotional, and she's like, you're really like buttoned up and like grounded and centered, and I was like, oh my God, if she fucking knew what was going on inside, like. Oh, that's just how I act. That's not what's going on inside. But I remember that she said that, and I was like, oh wow, like the projection is working, but that's not who I am. And so when I did the past life regression at the end of the session, like, oh my gosh, this emotion like from deep inside, like really primal. I was weeping, and I had not even I don't even remember before that time the last time I wept. So it was really powerful, and I felt so much lighter afterward, and that's why I took those few months off to be like, let me do a lot more of that.
yeah,
See
sure.
how much lighter I can feel. So I did that, and then I started my own company, my own consulting company, and mostly have been doing. I mean, I do a lot of different things, but in that role, mostly mainstream, neuroscience models for companies and regular science work. And I don't know. I mean, I don't hide this side. I have a Substack where I write about this stuff, and I publish it on LinkedIn. I don't hide it. So it's like, I mean, the people who hire me must know. So there have been, of course, people, like recently with the telepathy tapes, that podcast that came out. I wrote a piece with my friend Tom Morgan on it, even though I didn't really want to, because I was like, I was like, it's not a scientific study, and people are ripping it apart. And
she says as much, I mean,
yeah, I know.
Kai Dickens says this isn't science. Basically, I want to intrigue people so that the science will happen, is what her approach is. And I'm like,
yeah.
So what? I mean, go study it then. That's all I mean, anyway.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but we did write it, and there has been some pushback there. And I mean, there's been a little bit, but I don't know. It hasn't, it hasn't been. I think before the book came out, another scientist who works at a major university, but who also on the side publishes on this kind of stuff. I mean, he told me, he was like, I wouldn't worry about it. He's like, your colleagues are too busy with their own lives and work to really even care or to read what you're putting out there, probably. So he's like, he said it hadn't been a problem for him, and he's like, I just wouldn't even worry about it. And it hasn't been like a huge problem. I mean, I think maybe if you're trying to work in a very typical mainstream space, it could be.
Or like if you're in academia or something where
in academia,
where people stake everything on reputation, and rumor mills can dethrone people really quickly.
Yeah, because there's definitely a lot of stigma. There's a lot of social, it's like the social pressure of one person will roll their eyes, and it's like everyone has to agree. Type of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you were interviewing all those folks and you were talking to people who would only, sort of grudgingly admit that they had some interest in the topic but weren't ready to go public or whatnot, what was that the main reason why they were reticent to come forward? Is that risk to reputation, or did they offer up any other kind of explanations?
Yeah, no, that.
That, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of an obvious question.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, one of them, I mean, he didn't say it, but I know him really well. So I was like, I know that. And then one of them did say that, or she was like, I mean, actually, she let me use her name in the book, but I remember she was saying we talked about a lot of crazy stuff, and I, out of respect, didn't put not crazy, but you know what I mean, like a lot of out there things that academia would consider really
Yeah.
out there.
Challenging
And
the paradigm
so,
or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, and that stuff I didn't put in just out of respect for her, but because she had said, like, you know, I don't go to the Department of Psychology meetings and talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I'll leave that out.
What I'm curious about, I mean, this has led me, like you, on a long journey, and I've done a lot of reading and researching in different formulations of what this might mean. Like, you know, there's the ancient sort of religious texts like the Vedas and Hinduism and Buddhism, and up through, like, you know, theosophy, and I mean, all kinds of ways of grokking all of this. Where have you landed in terms of, because one of the things that's interesting about your book is you talk about the lenses that you use to kind of deal with this, and on one hand you were intrigued by the spiritual lens of, you know, the talk of souls and spirit and that sort of thing, but then when you were researching the psi phenomenon stuff, you were really dealing with a lot of scientific principles
Mhm.
and whatnot. Where have you finally settled out into how you define your truth about the nature of reality? Is there a
Yeah, I
system that
mean,
you kind of ascribe to, or is it more of your own kind of assemblage of, you know, thought?
I mean, I'm probably still trying to figure it out. I mean, I do think, feel that there is a spiritual aspect to the universe. I mean, I mean, based on the fact that there's just so many reports of the same story, which I said in the book, like to me, I just can't really explain that away. Um, and I do think the universe is a mirror. And like, you know, it's like a responsive, like it responds to you. So I do kind of, and I've actually, even before I was a scientist, I kind of lived that way. And I didn't know it was a framework. I wouldn't have called it spiritual or anything. That was just my experience,
Yeah.
was that we are in flow and connected to the universe. And yeah, in times of like, sometimes when you're internally going through a lot, suddenly everything around you starts going into chaos too. And so, yeah, what as above, so below, or whatever. Like I always believed that because it was my experience. So I definitely
Oh,
still believe that. I've only found
there's a little
more and more evidence
prototype
for
of mine in the
that.
garage.
And the spiritual
The
stuff,
ARC device.
yeah, it feels
Hook it up to
like,
your car, wherever it'll fit.
I mean, I think there is. I believe that there's a lot more than we can prove or measure with our, you know, physical instruments.
It's interesting. To me, it almost seems
This
like it's a
beauty
matter
won't
of
just be your tour guide.
in some
It's
sense,
your
the label
North
to use.
Star and
Like,
the only
you
way
know,
back
people
to
who are trying to
safety.
approach this from
Heck,
a
you should consider it
you
the
know, more
Father, Son,
clinical
and
or
Holy
antiseptic
Spirit if you
place
plan
to
on staying
prove
alive.
it or to
That's
validate
how
it for
important
themselves,
this thing will
talk
be to
about
you.
consciousness.
Yes,
And they use
that's my
terms related to
very
that,
own invention.
you know, sometimes rather
I'll tell
loosely
you more about it
to
if
make
you
a space
live
for
long
themselves.
enough to use
And but
it.
it really could just be swapped out for spirit in another
Yeah.
person's system, and it makes the same sense. So it's
Yes.
interesting how people are trying to grok it that way. You know.
That's what it's fun. Yeah, isn't. I'm so glad you said that because we started doing these events at the Society for Neuroscience conference where we have created these spaces. They're satellite events, so they're not part of they're part of the main conference, but not like you don't have to register to go in. It's we make them public, but it's, you know, neuroscience and spirituality, and we've done it for the last 3 years. And this year we were talking about that. I was trying to, because I started noticing. I mean, you have no idea who's coming to the meeting, and but so everyone who comes is at a different place in their journey, and some of them are very comfortable saying, "I'm a neuro microbiologist, but I'm also a Reiki master," and then some saying. You know, talking about what parts
If
of
you're
the
all
brain
set, take a look
are
at the
involved in
projector
psychic
against the
phenomena,
wall.
and then you have like other scientists who are way more cautious. So it was all different levels, and we had a whole discussion around. Um,
This
just
is
since
the
I had
zone.
spent obviously a lot more time
Within
thinking
these
about this than
borders,
most of them,
all
I was
matter
like,
has lost the
it's
ability to
language.
hold a constant physical state. What that means is the shape, size, and makeup of just about everything constantly changes. A mile of grass can turn into 10 miles of swamp in the blink of an eye, and it does. Constantly. It's caused by something we call instability. We're completely surrounded by it, and once you've watched it chew through entire mountain ranges, you'll understand that you don't want to get anywhere near it. We can only survive in here within pockets of stability. That's what you're standing in now. And that's what you're seeing mapped on the route planner. If we're going to find you a way out of the zone, you'll need to build a new antenna. Until then, you won't be able to detect stabilized routes beyond your immediate area. So, you've got to go hunting for parts, and that means taking a drive. Go on, pick a route. The Arc device in your car will then show you where you need to go. Off you go. Make a left out of the garage and follow the access road.
Okay, newbie. I'll keep this simple. Don't want to overwhelm that little brain of yours. You'll need a few things to rebuild the antenna at the garage. First on the list is plasma. The woods are littered with plasma generators. Look for a research trailer or a spark tower. That's those antenna things zapping you when you get too close. Both are always accompanied by plasma generators. The ARC device is picking up on some plasma generators nearby. Your headset has a built-in scanner. Use it on the plasma generator, and it'll figure out the tools you need.
Looks like it's ripe for the picking. Can't get at it with your hands, though. An impact hammer will do the trick. Find those materials by any means necessary. No one's coming back ever again, so go on and take what you need. Transports, homes, outposts, facilities, they've all been abandoned since the zone was decommissioned in 87. Most of those structures won't even be there the next time the instability scrambles the area. So loot to your heart's content. Just loot away.
Look at you, out in the zone all on your own. They grow up so fast, don't they? And I'll be back at the helm. Been a long time, old gal. Didn't think we'd, talk again after that whole Sasquatch incident.
Yes, I was hoping to go another decade without hearing your voice again. What, did you finally talk Francis to death?
Hello to you too, Oppie. And no, I'm still here.
Driver, I bet you're dying to hear all about the remnants by now.
Can you not? I'm a little busy trying to keep them alive.
I'll keep to the basics, I promise. They deserve to know what they're getting into.
Fine. I'm giving you 60 seconds.
That is not nearly enough time to get...
55 seconds and counting.
Okay. The remnants, in short, they're old objects that do all sorts of weird things. They bind themselves to people, and you're the latest victim. You and the car are inseparable now, so get acquainted. Once the remnant is bound to someone, they become gradually more obsessed with it. It takes over the victim's mind, until they go crazy and run off into the zone with it. No one has ever been able to resist its siren call. That fixation is probably worming its way into your brain as we speak. This is the first time we've ever got our hands on one. But we know all about the past remnants, and oh gosh, this one time it materialized as an old copper kettle, and the tea that came out of that thing, it was...
And now I'm I'm splitting the transmissions going to your receiver. Anything critical to your immediate needs will broadcast directly and immediately to your radio and headset. Anything not mission critical will be on a low priority frequency. Those transmissions will be recorded and indexed for you to listen to at your leisure. And by low priority, I mean just about everything that comes out of Tobias's mouth. shelter near one of the old Gorilla radio stations. That ought to be prime pickings for antenna parts. I've loaded its approximate location to your map. Look for an antenna tower up on a hill somewhere. ends up on a hill somewhere. Eyes to the horizon. The instability's ticking up by the second. But you can't get back the way you came. The instability makes all routes one way. And that's where my Octavice comes into play. It'll get you back to the garage, but it needs to be charged first. And to do that, you'll need anchors. Take a look at the Octavice display. It maps all anchors in the nearby area. Find an anchor and feed it to the Octavice to charge it. But don't you worry your pretty little head about how it works. You'll be out of here soon, so there's no reason to learn more about limb technology than you need to know.
Hey, Hoppy, look, I keep thinking the way you're helping our friend here right now seems positively helpful. Seems like me. You're looking to turn a new leaf or something?
The only thing I want to look at is a 12-year-old whiskey. And the back of this breacher's head when I send them packing.
But isn't it worth taking a detour to run just a tiny little test?
Can't think of a worse way to spend my time.
Please.
I've seen you manipulate waveforms with your right hand and knock back a double with your left. Or am I to understand you've lost your touch?
What I'm understanding is that you won't shut the hell up until I test this remnant.
Yep.
Fine, stop crowding my frequency.
What? Wait, really? Hoppy, darling, you never give in this easily. What's going on?
Francis?
Yes?
How have you not thrown him to the bunnies by now?
80 years old and only getting sharper by the day. You're a legend. A role model.
I'm giving you 10 seconds to get out of my...
Okay, we're signing off.
Hey, driver, good luck out there. And watch out for the bunnies. They are a doozy.
Those anchors may look like glowing balls of magic, but it's Limtech through and through. Don't be scared. They haven't exploded in anyone's face recently. into it. Yes, it looks like hot death, but it's so much better than getting scrambled right against the middle. Well. You're alive. For certain if the zone didn't get you, that gateway would. Did I not mention that you're the first human I've sent through that thing? I mean, there have been rodents, but it's not like it's completely untested. But anyway, it worked.
So, you should have made it back with everything you collected out there. That's the beauty of the gateway. It's the only way to get back with all your marbles intact. Now, take those parts you found into the back room. I'll let you use my fabrication station. For now. That station will concoct ways for you to rig up anything from roof racks to flare guns. Assembling an antenna with those parts you brought back should be easy as pie, but it requires anchor juice to work its magic, so bring back as many as you can. And just because I haven't used that garage in decades doesn't mean you can trash the place. Mess up my equipment and I'll throw you to the anomalies so quick you'll get whiplash. We clear? Antenna signals coming through loud and clear. Give it a moment to initialize. Make sure to empty your trunk before heading back out. You'll need the space. everything's in working shape, more or less. I've hooked up the antenna to the route planner. Give it a look after you're done peeping through my garage.